Absolutely. I think that's a huge part of writing is actually the networking, because although the actual process of writing is sitting in front of a screen or a piece of paper, if that's what floats your boat. But, at the end of the day, if you want people to read it, your stuff, you've got to get it out there. And the only way you're going to do that is by that sort of process of networking and getting to know people and, getting your name out.
Totally.
And
Conferences.
yeah, and you just got to get on that treadmill and get out there and do stuff, and get your face known, which is
Yeah.
which is really difficult initially for me because I was writing under a pseudonym and I didn't want my face known. So it was just like,
Right.
how do I do these talks without showing my face, And I had to sort of like say no, I can't do that because yeah,
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, that is tough. And well, and a lot of writers are introverts, right? That's
yeah,
kind of the stereotype, but it's a true stereotype, and they don't like the idea of networking or social media. But I mean, I'll tell you, like I've interviewed people and met them at conferences and kind of gotten to be friends with them. Where if I'm struggling with something, say with a publisher, I'll say, "Hey, can we talk?" Just so I can understand how your publisher does this. So
yeah.
that's great to have that kind of ability to understand the industry through colleagues, that if you're just sitting there writing and not communicating, you don't have that opportunity.
Yeah, yeah.
And Carter, with your having worked with different publishers, would it be still the case that you still had to be very proactive with your own marketing?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I think that's an existential issue. Is that you do have to know all those ropes. And, I mean, social media, newsletters, things like that. I would say I'm probably more proactive than most because that's been drilled into me over the years. And, different publishers give you different levels of support. I get tremendous support right now with my publisher, but I still always hire my own outside PR marketing firm. And then they work together for a book release. And then they tell me a lot of what to do. Make sure you post this, and you start to learn how to use all the different Canva and all the different graphic tools and things like that. And it's a lot. It's a lot, and it's hard for most people to do self promotion because I think us writers, we typically have very low self esteem regarding our books, and so it's hard to shout to the heavens about it. But it is pretty necessary. So, but you don't have to do everything. You just have to kind of do what you like and what you're good at and put your time and effort into that. But it is time consuming.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
You mentioned off camera before we started a new thing that you're doing using QR code or barcodes. Can you tell us a little bit about that and how that links to video promotional material?
Yeah, whenever I'm writing, I tend to like get ideas for multimedia that can be part of the book itself. So I've included, fake websites in books where I've had somebody develop a whole website. And I've commissioned people to do art that goes into my books just because I want to see it. And with my latest book, Tell Me What You Did, which is about a podcaster, I was realizing, this podcaster she always deletes the video of the interview because it's part of her agreement with her guests because they're confessing to crimes. But then she always, unbeknownst to them, she always records her side of the conversation with her iPhone, kind of perched over her monitor. So I'm writing this scene. I'm like, I want to see what this looks like. So I hired this actress who I'd gotten to know because she had been reading my books and had reached out to me. And I'm like, hey, if I pay you, can you do a few scenes for me with your iPhone? And so we had a production call and all this stuff, and she did these amazing scenes. And so I'm like, these are going in the book. And so through QR codes now in the book, you get to that page and you can, if you click on it, you'll see the scene you just read, her performing it.
That is very cool.
And it's creepy as shit because she's so good. And these are kind of harrowing scenes, these conversations where things are going down. And I'm like, that's amazing. And then you can see through Bitly, like how many people are actually clicking on these links. And it's a pretty low number, but it's exciting to see 50 people last week and the book's not even out yet have clicked on this link. And I wonder what their reaction was. And most people don't even see it and notice it at all. But I love those little elements that can maybe enhance a book a little bit.
Yeah.
So
I
when
thought
when
I thought I was cutting edge with it, just putting a QR code onto a bookmark and putting that in the books.
There you go.
so when people scan the QR code, is it taking them to a video that's hosted somewhere or an MP3 audio file?
Yeah, it's a video. And what I realized, so I had the scene, and then I realized, like, well, where does this scene exist? How is this scene actually, what's the logic behind this scene? And I realized, like, oh, this must be criminal evidence. So I packaged it as criminal evidence, like you request video evidence from the state. So it's packaged with like the Vermont State Police logo and this and that. It's like this has been recovered and from a broken iPhone, and so it looks very official. So yeah, it just goes straight to actually my personal Google Drive. That's just where it exists. So I got to know not to delete that folder.
Yeah, yeah, that's excellent. That's very cool. So that you've only just started doing that with your new book that's coming out?
Yeah, that's the first time I've done it. And, my editor's like, I've never seen this before. I don't know if anyone's ever done this, but we'll see. And she's never worked with QR codes, so we had to get the design team involved. But like I said, I think most people aren't going to click on it. But for those who do, maybe it'll be kind of cool for them.
That's really cool. I don't know whether there's uh, aspects where it could be used for, say, audiobooks. So like having little teasers available. My first book was converted into an audiobook, and I was thinking that would be a great idea to have a QR code where people could just scan it and listen to a sample chapter or something.
Get a preview. Yeah,
Yeah, preview.
totally. You could do whatever. I mean, some people are still like, maybe this is going to link to something that's going to give me a virus or whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
And being kind of realistic about who your demographic is, thriller readers in the US, a lot of it, especially what I write, 40 to 70-year-old female. So I look at my agent who's around in that age range. She's like, I hate QR codes. I would never scan this. I didn't like when we had to do that with menus during the pandemic. So
I was going to
depends on
say
people's
that
comfort levels.
QR codes have got exponential because of
Right.
the
People are
pandemic.
familiar with them now,
Yeah,
at
they
least.
know what they are.
Exactly. So
We were toying with an idea to set up a company producing QR codes that were sort of like metal ones that you would place along a walk, and you could go
oh,
and QR code and then read something about the view you're seeing and stuff like that.
that's great. I love that.
But at the time, it was just like nobody would know what the bloody hell a QR code is, and it would just be
Right.
ignored.
Right.
Now,
Somebody spills their drink on it, it doesn't work.
Can we just, and it's a topic that we could probably spend ages on, but just kind of briefly, Carter, what's your take on the publishing landscape in the USA? I mean, it's a much smaller industry here in Australia. But in terms of the requirement to have an agent before you can even be considered for a traditional publishing contract, and how you are seeing the evolution of self-publishing, what are your thoughts around those ideas?
Yeah, it's great questions. I mean, obviously, there's been a real proliferation of not only self-publishing but smaller indie presses, which I think is amazing, and that does nothing but help the writing community. And a lot of those indie presses are now saying you don't have to be agented. But I think they quickly find out it's also a lot of work because everybody submits to them. My agent told me recently, she's like, getting published traditionally is harder than ever in the US. Getting an agent is harder than ever. She once told me something, and she's just an independent agent. Several years ago, she kind of said, look, I get 20 to 30 submission queries a day, and I take on maybe one client a year.
wow.
So you start looking at those odds, and you're like, well, how can I ever be published? Which is why you shouldn't focus on that stuff. Globally, it all starts with you having the requirement of having to write a great book. I mean, that doesn't go away, and that's the bare minimum that you have to do. So when I look at self-publishing, which I have nothing against, and I have several friends who self-publish, I think about, make sure you really understand the reason why you're doing this. If you've gotten 100 rejections, maybe your book's not ready. And you can get rejected for a lot of different reasons, but you should be curious about it and think like, okay, if I had self-published my first book that didn't sell, I probably would have regretted it because I don't think that book was ready to be published. And once it's out there, and there's not, and future publishers can look at your sales, and they want you to be debut maybe in their eyes. So you just have to be very careful. But it's also very frustrating because people years and years and years and years go by and nothing happens. I mean, with my own journey, that day in that class, I started writing that riddle to when my first book with that tiny publisher hit the shelves. 9 years had passed. So it's not a fast, it's not a fast process. And that's why you don't quit your job.
And with that first one, you said that after 6 months or so, that small publisher closed. What happened with that book? Were you able to republish it elsewhere, or was that the lifespan of that book?
Yeah, we got the rights back to that book, and then my third publisher, Ocean View, who had 2 of my titles at the time, asked to buy that book. So it's with Ocean View now. So I've got 3 titles with them. So they keep it alive, as much as it deserves to be alive. But you get the rights back.
Okay. Can we move on to now your the programs that you offer under, it's called Unbound Writer. You have programs which you offer for writers, coaching, writing retreats and workshops and online classes. So how did that concept begin? How has it evolved? And tell us a little bit more about Unbound Writer.
Sure. Thank you. I just love talking to writers. I love teaching. I did a lot of that with my corporate job. I do a lot of public speaking. And I just, you get to a certain point when you've been writing for a long time, you're like, I have some things to say. I have some wisdom to impart, I think. A lot of it's confidence. A lot of it's like, it's very hard for me to get to a place to feel like I know a lot and to be able to say that. But you do look back and you're like, I have some things. How can I package this into a place where authors can get benefit for it, and I can hopefully, make some kind of career out of it as well. So I started offering one-on-one private coaching, and then I launched a couple retreats, 2.5-day, immersive retreats, seminars, and then we're developing a series of online courses. There's 3 available right now. That's just self-guided online courses. And it's fun. It's hard I love putting it all together. It's hard to make people aware of it. So there's a lot of levels of marketing going on with that, a lot of cost associated with that just to get a reach. And, you just hope to build upon it. So, but you sit and you do your one-on-one coaching sessions, and it's lovely. I love hearing people's like, this is my story. I need help with it. And it's exciting because it might be something I'm totally unfamiliar with. And I just think and I'm like, I've been there. I know exactly what you're talking about. And here's a mistake I made. So now I can tell you not to make this mistake.
Yeah.
You can rest assured now you've got at least another 5 of our listeners that know about
Wonderful.
Your courses.
I work all time zones.
That's a bit generous. 5.
Yeah, no. I upped it from 3.
I know the podcast stuff is hard, isn't it? Because you just you get the numbers and you're like, okay, I guess, am I talking to an echo chamber? you just keep at it.
You just keep at it.
Yeah.
We'll come back to that, but just in terms of your writing courses and workshops, did you start with a particular niche area where you felt, I'll have to edit that. Sorry, someone's coming to my front door. I'll start again. Edit point. With your workshops, did you start with some sort of niche area where you felt that you were had something to say, you had an opinion, or you had some level of expertise that you felt, I can workshop this?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I did, but I mostly started out knowing what I didn't want to do, and I think that was the hardest part for me, was figuring out, can I do this? Because one thing I don't do is I don't say, this is how you should craft a scene. You absolutely need to pants. You can't whatever. There's a million ways to write a book. We all know that. And there are a lot of teachers out there who say, this is how you do it. And that to me is bullshit. No, we all break the rules. So whenever I go into that, it's like, this is how I do it. This works for me. This might not work for you. But what I really wanted to focus on, which I think isn't talked about a whole lot, is the writer's psychology. So I spend a lot of time talking about confidence, calling yourself a writer, imposter syndrome. What are the things that are blocking you? Oh, I have writer's block. That's bullshit. What's really going on? Let's get inside your brain and find out what is the blockage. What is your fear? With fear of failure, fear of success. I love talking about, because I've gone through all of that stuff. You know, it took me probably 12 years from the day I started writing to somebody at a cocktail party asking me what I do and telling them, in addition to my other job, that I'm a writer, because I just felt like such a fraud. So I love, and those are wasted years, because if you're really committed to the craft, even if you haven't sold anything, you're a writer. You should be calling yourself, and that, having that confidence, then it makes you a writer. All those things happen because you're assuming the personality of the person you want to be. And I wasted a lot of years not realizing that. So I love talking about things like that to aspiring writers.
Yeah, it's very much, we talk a lot about imposter syndrome, but it's about, you know, believing in yourself. And I've spoken to I do a bit of one-on-one coaching, particularly for people who are
That's
writing
great.
Australian crime fiction, because here in Australia we are so influenced by what we see on American television, and so
Huh.
many Australian crime writers who have no experience in law enforcement. All they know is what they see on American TV and CSI shows, which is so vastly different to how we
Right.
do
Just
things.
just the presence of guns. The different,
Yes,
Oh, the police
everything.
have guns here, yeah, yeah, but the
the
people don't.
police do, but like, yeah.
Yeah, different culture, different way of doing things, and so that's how I started doing workshops. Is I identified a niche area. I had felt I had some expertise to share, so I really boiled it down to what's my niche area. Instead of trying to embark on how to write a novel or, you know, the craft of writing, that's so broad, and there's 1,000 other workshops out there. It was a niche area that I thought I could give advice on, and so people now will contact me and say, I've had an issue with my manuscript. How would this look in reality? So we would talk it through and try and fix
That's great.
little problems. But it's interesting, you know, that's why I was really curious around how did you devise your workshop topics. Even recently, I'm struggling with this new manuscript that I'm writing in terms of the process for me. And almost subconsciously, I'm starting to strip it down to what are the building blocks to writing an 80,000 word manuscript. I know there are workshops out there around, you know, you can do a 6 month course and, you know, write your first novel, and they'll kind of talk you through it. But for me, I'm starting to think, okay, what's the process I've gone through? And for this particular story, where there's a few different protagonists and it's told in different points of view, I've got to the
Mhm.
25,000 word mark, and I've almost subconsciously built the building blocks for my story. But now I'm starting to hit that kind of, well, I've got to start to ramp up the pace of the story. I've kind of set the tone, and I put all the pieces of the puzzle there. Now I've got to start to assemble those pieces. And I'm thinking, well, this could almost be a workshop. You know, the process I'm going
Totally.
through right now, and having to troubleshoot and overcome difficulties. I started with an inciting incident at the beginning. I've started to introduce the readers to my characters, and their journeys are now starting to intersect. Now things need to start to happen. So,
Right.
have you kind of gone through similar processes with how you've devised your workshops, and a lot of it's been born from your own problems, and how you've solved those problems?
It has been. I think where you get into trouble, or you can get into trouble, is if you say to somebody, because it worked for you, like, hey,
This
I
is the way to
really am
fix it.
focused on the three act structure, and I need to make sure that the acts are all roughly, 30,000 words each. And there's got to be a hero's journey, and there's got to be change by the end. And I think then you start, if you have that in your mind, for me, writing, I get confused. So I'm much more of an organic writer, and just hoping all the stories, all the structure of a good story is coming from me subconsciously. Because if I start thinking, oh, has my hero changed? Do I need my hero to change? Why do they have to change? Then it gets very tough. So, and as you know from your own journey, Jack, I mean, it sounds like this book is different than what you've written before. you didn't employ that same technique in other books, perhaps.
Mm.
So who knows what the right way to do it is. So I very much say, this is what I do. Here are the mistakes I've made. Here's the feedback I've gotten by doing it this methodology. Here's when I've done it and it worked great, but I might try to replicate it and then it didn't work great. So to me, it's all about perseverance and going back to the psychology of thing of just keep your brain open, absorb information, be curious, and just write consistently, and your process will completely change over time.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm currently, as I say, I've just finished this series, and so I was towards the end of the last book. I was spending a lot of time thinking about my next book and where I was going with that and stuff like that. And then I decided that I was going to actually plan this one. I was going to use some software. I was going to plan it all out and this, that,
Mhm.
and the other. And what I've discovered is that bizarrely, I've gone 3 weeks without writing anything because I don't
Yeah,
want to plot. Um,
right, right.
and it's like, whoops, perhaps I should just start
Totally.
writing.
But I would suggest, Harry, that that's necessary to go through that, to
Yeah.
realize that, to affirm, because I've done that too. And I remember the book that I said, I'm going to outline this, and I outlined maybe the first half of it. That was the most I could do.
Yeah.
And then the very first chapter, this is kind of reflecting the gun comment from earlier, the gun going off. I was establishing my protagonist. He was driving in traffic, and I was kind of realizing like he kind of seems like an asshole. I don't want him to be an asshole. So I had him stop to help a stranded motorist, which wasn't in my outline. And then he gets out of the car. I'm like, he's going to get hit by another car. He has to get hit by another car. And he gets hit by a car and it completely blew up my outline.
Yeah.
So I threw the outline away. I'm like, all right, let's see what happens next.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
needed that to know, like, I can't outline. That's not how my brain works.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think it's a good lesson for anyone writing that, as you've already said, Carter, there's no right or wrong way of doing things. There are sort of rules that they say you should follow, but sometimes you just have to break the rule. And I just think it depends on the style of the story that you're telling. The last one I wrote was it was concurrent timelines. So the way I wrote that was vastly different. I had one timeline set
Totally.
in 1982, and it would alternate with present timeline. So I ended up writing that as two separate novellas. I wrote the 1982 timeline as
Oh,
its own
wow.
story, and then I had to think about, well, how is that going to dovetail into my present day timeline so that I can alternate the two chapters, and how am I going to make it work so that I'm not giving away too much information because it's going to spoil things for the present day timeline. That did require a lot of planning and structuring to make that work. And there were points where it just didn't work. I had to go back and rejig the structure of different chapters, as opposed to something where you're just writing something reactive. As I say, I think you said writing angry. You just wanted to write a story that's hard hitting. It's a thriller, action, just right off the seat of your pants. And another one I wrote was a historical mystery, and I had to do a lot of historical research. So I think it
That's
really
research.
just
Yeah, that's a lot of work.
depends on what you're writing.
Right.
Yeah.
And you sometimes have no context whether it works or not until a beta reader or an agent or somebody else sees it. Because, by the end of the book, most of the time by the end of the book, I'm like, this book sucks. I don't know what to do with it. And I hate it. I'm excited for the next thing. So you need that objective feedback to tell you whether it works or not.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we all get too close to our work.
Mm.
Absolutely.
I was looking at talking about your retreats, the location for your retreat. I was having a sneak on your website. The
Mm.
that luxury home in North Boulder. There was one photo where it was all covered in snow, and I'm thinking, man, if I knew that you were running a workshop or a 3 or 4 day retreat in winter, I'd jump on a bloody plane and come to it because that looked amazing.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's all about 10 miles from my house here in Colorado. And it's Boulder is a beautiful location. But I'll tell you, it's hard to get people to sign up because it's a decent financial commitment. And, again, all those reasons why we're scared to write, that comes into play. But sometimes people say, okay, if I do commit these funds, that's taking the right step to say I am a writer. But it's marketing these things is tough.
Yes, yeah. And for those writers who are looking at investing and attending workshops and retreats, again, as I say, it's validation that I'm willing to invest in myself. And I did
Right.
that. I started paying to attend writing workshops, and
Totally.
it was the best thing I did. Sometimes you just have to invest in your own development.
Right. And whether or not you get anything informationally out of the retreat, you've committed and you're saying, yeah, this is a tax write-off or whatever, because now this is now my career, or I'm giving it the same weight of a career as my other career. So, but many authors don't do that we're all ashamed to be doing something we love, right?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
because the idea is that we work hard and we don't like our jobs, and that's how life works. And now all of a sudden I'm doing something that pays me and I love, like, no, this has got to be a hobby. How dare I call this a career or a job?
Yeah, my missus knows how to piss me off, and that's the one she'll say, "Oh, you're spending all your time on your hobby," and it's
Right.
like,
Oh, right. No. You're like, no, this is who I
it's
am.
not a hobby.
Well, as they say,
Exactly.
if your job is something you love, you never work a day in your life.
That's right. That's 100% right. Yeah,
Mm.
I agree with that.
No, we are running out of time, but just to chat about your podcast before we wrap it up. So your podcast is called
Sure.
Marking It Up. Sorry, Making It Up. That's
Yeah.
actually how I came
Making it
across
up.
you. Making it up. That's how I came across you when I
Okay.
saw your podcast. And tell us a little bit more about that. I think there are a lot of similarities. You sort of touched on this before. Out there, there are many podcasts where authors come on and they kind of use it as a platform to promote their own book. We do get approached by authors saying, or we get approached by publicity companies saying, "I'm representing an author. Can you have them on your show to talk about their new book?" As you said, it's very hard to do that because it means you have to invest time to read their book, so you can have a genuine conversation about their book. But to be honest, it's a kind of it's a bit flat. You know, it's a bit boring, those conversations.
100%. Yeah.
Other because the reality is a lot of people don't care about your book. You know,
Right.
so what we've said to people is, look, we'd love to have you on our show, but we would like you to share your experience and provide advice and knowledge, so that because our listeners are emerging writers and they want to, you know, they don't care a lot about you plugging your own book, but what can you share? What advice? So that's kind of what we
Right.
use as a bit of a benchmark, and we say, look, I guess, do you have advice? Do you have a niche or area of expertise that we can talk about? Oh yeah, and we feel that's providing value to our listeners. Is that kind of
Totally.
very similar to how you've approached your podcast?
Yeah, a little bit. And I'm ashamed to say that I don't think too much about the listener. And it's kind of like when I write, I don't think too much about the reader. I do what's interesting to me.
Yeah,
And I know, just personally doing podcasts, like on the interviewee side of it, you get these 15, 20-minute podcasts where they ask you questions about your book, and then they ask you, what author, living or dead, do you want to have dinner with? And I'm like, I hate that shit. Like you said, it's very two-dimensional.
mm,
And I love listening to podcasts with humans who are being interviewed, and I love hearing their journey. I love
mm,
hearing, like you asked me earlier, what was your break? I love hearing about that. So I decided that's what I wanted to talk to people about. I wanted to be deep, long form, at least 45 minutes. I don't write any questions down in advance. I'm aware of who these people are. I've been to their website and I know they have a book coming out. We don't talk about the book. I mention it in the intro, of course, and I want them to sell it. But I love hearing about, why did you become a writer? Like, how did that happen? What are your struggles? Tell me about your rejections. Very similar. This is a very similar format. And at the end, we make up a short story. I force them to make up a short story with me every single time.
yes.
Which it's always nerve wracking for me, because I got to do it too. And you get these big name authors and they're scared and you're scared. And you're like, we're going to get through this together. And it's always a shit show. But it's fun. And that's the making it up part of it all.
Just tell us a little bit about that. I've seen those episodes where you've done that, and I'm thinking, I would probably have a deer in the headlights moment. Just go, I wouldn't.
That has happened.
Yeah. So just explain how it works. You pick a line from a random book, or is it from one of their books or a book?
No, I mean, it's almost always, sometimes I tell them, give me a color of a book, and I pick that color from the bookshelf. Or I have just selected 3 books and they pick one of them, and they pick a random page, and then I scan the page and I just find a sentence. And I'm like, I'm going to read this sentence, and then you're going to give me the next sentence, what happens. Then I'll do a couple sentences. And sometimes you have this pretty amazing mind meld depending on who the other person is, and you're just seeing the story together. Other times it just goes bizarrely in bizarre directions. But that's kind of the beauty of it all. I remember one time Maureen Johnson, this huge author, we're doing it, and she's like, I can't do this. She's like, I can't create words unless my fingers are physically moving.
Mm,
I'm like,
mm.
oh my God, that's fascinating, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
So, but I've only had one guest out of, 170 episodes or so request not to do it. And I'm
Hmm.
like, totally, that's fine. Like, I want you to be happy on my show.
Yeah, yeah.
But everyone else has been game, and it's pretty amazing.
But I guess it kind of highlights how the creative part of the brain works. You know, those impromptu where you're being forced to think of something on the spot. I've found that my most creative times are when I just sit down and start writing. I will spend a lot of time thinking and lamenting around what's my story going to be and what's my next chapter going to be, and it's not until you just say, you know what, I'm just going to sit and just start writing, even
Right.
if it's rubbish that's coming. So it just starts to get those creative juices in your mind working. That I find that works for me. So I can see that little exercise that you do, where it's just on the spot, impromptu. Let's just see where the story takes us. It's just
Yeah.
getting those creative juices flowing.
And I think sometimes we're our most creative when we're also our most vulnerable, right? Like it just, you have to break down those barriers that are keeping you scared and just be like, all right, I'm just going to go with this and I don't care how stupid I look. Some of the best work comes from those moments.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, look, we do have to wrap up. We've been chatting for about an hour now, so it's been an excellent conversation. So for people who are interested in looking at your podcast, it's Making It Up. Check it out. It's a very cool podcast. Carter, you've been an excellent guest. It's been an absolute pleasure to have a chat to you today. Thanks so much.
Jack and Harry, thanks so much for having me on your show. And I loved this free flowing conversation.
Yeah, it's been brilliant talking to you. Thank you very much.
All right.
All right,
Take
and
care,
we'll be sure to
gents.
stay in contact because I'm sure there'll be other days where we can get together and chat about a whole bunch of other things. So, uh,
I would love that.
thank you. Thanks,
Sounds good.
everyone. We will say goodbye for now. We'll see you next time. All the best.